So do you need a roll call this time for,
I can do
let's
it.
go ahead and do a roll call.
Director Bond, Director Amen,
Here.
Director Fix,
Yes.
Director Handrew,
Yeah.
Director Old,
Here.
Director Mason, Director Mayor,
Here.
Director Whittington. Director Dodge,
Here.
Director Dreehouse,
Here.
Director Hohol,
Here.
Director Tyler Lee,
Here.
Director Mattia,
Here.
Director Picciarelli,
Here.
Director Matz,
Here.
Director Silac,
Here.
Director Gregoire,
Here.
Director Portman,
Here.
Director Baker,
Here.
Director Claymire,
Here.
Director Plummer,
Here.
Director Whittington.
It's not an addition.
Having some issues. Did I miss anyone?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, wait for.
Thank you very much. We have the agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with, I think there's one addition.
I don't have a change to the agenda. I do have a text from Glenn Miller that he's unable to connect right now.
Thank you. That is. So should we show him joining us virtually then?
He's trying and he's saying that he's blocked right now.
Okay.
Just.
He's been fired.
Is he on a cell phone?
Director,
He's on his county network, so he's trying to get in, so I'm not sure. But just to let you know that he's.
So under executive session, when you look at your agenda, it says personnel matters. That'll be personnel and legal. So then is there a motion to approve the agenda as just laid out? Motion by
Matz,
Mr.
second.
Fix, second by
Matt.
Ms. Matz, Director Matz. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries. We have the minutes that were presented in your packet. Assuming most have had a chance to take a look at it. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Amen.
Second Fix.
Motions by Julie and by Jeffrey. Just a second. And all in favor, say aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Now, we do have our opportunity, and this is one of the most uplifting and meaningful parts of our agenda is our personal story. I believe we have Director Matz to deliver the personal story.
Here, up there, doesn't matter to me.
I would recommend coming up so that people who are watching either now or in the future will be able to see it.
Morning, everybody. It's good to see you all here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So holidays obviously bring a lot of joy, a lot of cause for celebration, family gatherings, all kinds of good stuff. And that doesn't happen for everybody. And we're here for that reason, because we've got folks in the community who are grieving. They've got loss. They've lost family members. They've lost parts of their lives to addiction. And so it's hard for them to celebrate, but sometimes you get folks who manage to take that loss and turn it into something better. And I'll tell you that Mr. and Mrs. Bornstein are people like that. All right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about their story, what their loss was and how they turned that around. Right. So when Shelley and Travis Bornstein were raising their son, Tyler, you can see in the picture, they envisioned for him a long life filled with happiness and success. And he was an athlete. He was a competitive kid. He was an exceptional academic student. And so it would be envisioned that he would in fact have a long life full of success. However, as a competitor and an athlete, it's also a fact of life that he's going to have injuries. Okay. And his first injury and surgery occurred when he was just 11 years old. He underwent that first surgery, and at that age, he received his first prescription for opiates. A few years later, he had to undergo another surgery, but at that point, it was fairly clear that he had become addicted to those opiates. Where he was previously a 4.0 student and an accomplished athlete, by his senior year of high school, he was struggling with active addiction. The Bornsteins recognized the problem, and once they did, they tried to give their son the help he needed. Over the course of 6 years, he went through a variety of different treatment programs, but continued to struggle. And I think we all know, because we've heard the stories, it's almost never an initial success. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes repeated work. So in his final attempt to get into a detox facility, he was put on a waiting list. And I think we all know that, those programs always have waiting lists because the need is so big. So while he was waiting to get into treatment, he suffered an accidental overdose, and Tyler was left in a field without medical care, and he died on September 28th, 2014. So despite that, it's pretty well publicized that there's been a spike, or around that time, there's a spike in overdose deaths. It was clear to Shelley Bornstein that many people remained in denial of the horrible impact of this epidemic. And so she founded Hope United, and she and her husband worked together in that foundation. Soon after launching that nonprofit, Travis, Mr. Bornstein, went to the National Teamsters Convention, and he spoke to them about, his son's story, their efforts to build Hope United and what they wanted to do with Hope United. All right. And they raised at that event more than $1 million in just 2 hours. All right. The Bornsteins then began to do their work to create Tyler's Redemption Place, which you see here. And it was built with the aim of filling gaps in support after treatment and providing a safe space where people can immediately come and feel valued and assisted. So after several years of work, Tyler's Redemption Place opened in February 2023. It's a 7,500 square foot log cabin made up of community rooms, meeting spaces, a kitchen, a gym, game room, salt cave, and much more. It sits on 10 acres that the county donated from our old Edwin Shaw Hospital property. So, thank God we actually got to make some productive use of some portion of that property. And I'll tell you that my boss, Executive Shapiro, she went to the groundbreaking. She's toured the facility on several occasions. And she tells me that when you walk through the door, it's like somebody puts their arms around you to walk you through your journey. So anyways, Hope United has proudly gotten Tyler's Redemption Place certified by several accrediting organizations, including the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, to operate as a peer recovery organization. In addition to hosting peer support meetings, grief and family support programs, wellness programs, and job readiness classes, Tyler's Redemption Place is also a drop-in facility where people can immediately come and talk to somebody who can provide them with peer support. Since the peer support program's launch in August, several participants have gotten back into treatment. On average, 800 people come through the door of Tyler's Redemption Place each month, seeking the support they need to lead healthier lives. Mrs. Bornstein says the recovery community organizations like Hope United, which are run primarily by those in recovery themselves or who are grieving from loss of somebody who has succumbed to the addiction, they're changing outcomes one by one by meeting people where they are and connecting with them. She believes the approach helps people who may get missed in the system, and with more boots on the ground and by showing more compassion, we can save more lives. We thank Shelley for sharing her family's story with us. She has turned the unimaginable loss of her son into action in about the most positive way that you can. And she provides hope to many in not just Summit County, but also Portage and Stark. Please join me and recognizing the Bornsteins for their work and the compassion that they've shown to the individuals and families struggling with substance use.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. It is inspiring to hear how Shelley and her family have worked through times in places. Northeast Ohio. Thank you. So today we'll have committee reports from several of our committees. First up, the executive committee report. And we did meet on November 29th, virtually, I might add. In your copy of the calendar for the, and it's posted for next year, 2024. The staff will soon be sharing invites with you for those meetings. I'd like to point out a couple things right off. One is we will not have a full board meeting in January. However, all committee meetings will be able to continue. And additionally, we've invited our board to the first retreat of the new year, which is now slated for March. At this point will be, it'll help us get through our annual trainings, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and of course, many other things as required by our policies. So please stay tuned for more information. A board recess in December of next year, 2024. Please note that the executive committee meetings and all public meetings have been posted. Is there a motion to approve the 2024 board meeting calendar as proposed by the executive committee?
Matt's moved.
Second Fix.
Motion by Matt, second by Fix. Any discussion on the motion?
Here. Not that I'm not dying to spend my Valentine's Day with all of you, but
I'm personally hurt because when I saw that date set, I was.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification, will the retreat be on the March 13th date or a different date?
The retreat date has not been scheduled. We're hoping to identify a date that works for most in March. So be on the lookout for that. We want to make sure that we, can get the majority of folks. I know it's outside of this traditional meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. Great question. So going back to the motion that's upon the floor is that I will call for a roll call. All in favor of approving the calendar for 2024, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion carries. Next up is the Audit and Finance Committee. And we have a newly selected chairman by the membership. The Audit and Finance Committee, Evan Claymeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last month, the Finance and Audit Committee met to approve the proposed 2024 One Ohio budget. While Alicia and Jim are going to get into the specifics of the numbers, I wanted to highlight a few things for the board. First, management has done a great job reducing expenses, especially for a new foundation getting off the ground. Thank you. Earlier this year, the board allocated $3.5 million to One Ohio's operations. That money was for the foundation's operations for 2023, 2024, as well as some of the bills for 2022 that had not yet been finalized or come into the foundation yet. What we're here today propose is not an additional allocation of funds, but more a approval to spend already allocated funds. This money we're talking about today will not affect any of the money we have already allocated to the regions, and in fact is meant to support the grant allocation process. One Ohio's ratio of percentage of our budget that goes to operations versus programming is 4.5% of our total budget for operations, while 95.5% being spent on services. In a national study that Alicia did for similarly situated foundations and nonprofits, that ratio is significantly less than our peers. Audit and Finance Committee passed this budget unanimously. I encourage the board to do the same, and I'll pass it back to you, Alicia.
Thanks, Evan. And we have provided in your packets detail on the budget. I just want to walk through a few highlights to make sure that we can have discussion about this budget, which will be really important for us to kind of move forward in 2024. A few of the budget highlights that we have pointed out, and as Evan mentioned, we are consistent in our thought that this budget proposed will award 51 million in regional grants in 2024. We will use these funds that we'll talk about in a moment to really establish a premier grant process and support system, not only from the One Ohio Foundation perspective, but in partnership with our regional boards and committees. We also hope to do this through collaboration and accountability. And so along the way, there are policies that you all have laid out that we believe will really support the work and make sure that we have those check-in points as needed to discuss things. And I'll speak on that more in a moment. This will also allow us to really start to think about leveraging public-private partnerships, and we'll talk more about that in our new year as we talk through our strategic plan. How we grow the foundation is going to be an important piece to hopefully, I hope, and then lastly, as Evan mentioned, we will not be asking for additional allocations to the operating budget. We are working within the 3.5 that you all have allocated. Really trying to make sure we keep all costs down, and we'll talk through that in a second. I think a couple other things to note with this, it's December 2024, so we really have work to do to continue to work with our vendors and partners. What you'll see in these numbers are our best estimates of that work. And we will work with the Audit and Finance Committee to do a RFP and competitive bid processes as needed for large purchases. And so we have that kind of control system in place. We also have committee meetings that we're working on with Director Amen around personnel. And so although we have a personnel budget in front of you, we still have a lot of work to do to talk through employee benefits, employee salary, and things of that nature. So this budget really will allow for flexibility as we still have many conversations to go, and things will come through the committee and back to the board as we have those conversations for board. All right, you can go to the next. So what we know about our 2024 revenue is that we expect a little more than 65 million at this point to come in 2024, understanding a few things. Right at this point, we've only received 4 of 9 settlements payments. We have several more to go. We've been in contact with the national groups in the Attorney General's office to understand what's going on with those payments. We were hoping to see a few of them come in, but at this point in December, we haven't. So we're going to assume that we'll probably and likely see some of those start to flow in 2024. We also know that the recent Kroger settlement has not been included in any of our numbers. We are still waiting to see estimates of those. So that 65 million estimation does not include Kroger, as well as the Purdue Pharma Sackler family bankruptcy proceedings. I know that this has been a lot of, we have friends who went to Washington, D.C. and have been paying a lot of attention to the discussions about this case. And so we are too closely watching these conversations to understand what that will mean for Ohio, and particularly One Ohio. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. We did receive, and Jim and his financial, we'll talk a little bit about that and what we've received from them. There isn't a clear payout schedule to that, and we'll hit that later today when we go through the financial. So what are we asking? So for 2024, we are asking for 2 budgets. One, a grant budget really focused on the regional dollars and what we believe we need to support the grant system. So what you will see here is the 51 million that we've talked about. As you know, this kind of breaks out into the 19 regional formula that gives each region an allocation. That's what's reflected here. We also have funds for our grants management and professional development. These again are estimates. This will support the grants manager position, as well as the Akoya Go software that some of you may have saw this morning. We had a demo at our grants meeting, and then allow for some flexibility in that professional development item to do grant applicant training, regional support, listening sessions, all the things that we think it's going to take to kind of pull off the grants process in 2024, with a note that I'm frugal, and so if we can find free spaces, we will. If we can, partner and collaborate with groups to pull off listening sessions, we will. Looking for, ways to save every dollar at every turn. So we're excited about the grants budget. The second budget, as detailed in our fiscal policy, we will always have a grants budget and an operating budget. Is our operating budget. This again, kind of going back to some of those earlier statements, our best estimates for this year. Some of the biggest distinctions and differences in this budget compared to 2023 are focused around contracted services. As you know, we spent, quite a bit in legal services in 2023. So this reflects a significant decrease in that contracted services line item, but it also reflects an increase in personnel to really start to grow the One Ohio team. It includes folks like myself, Jim, and Sarah, who will be on the team. An administrative assistant or office folks to really keep our wheels running effectively and efficiently, and some flexibility. I think Director Amen and I and others are going to be really talking through the fact that this is a learning year for One Ohio. I don't know if we're to expect 1,000 applications or 100, and so with that, I think we would need some flexibility, for example, to hire perhaps another grants associate if we have 1,000 contracts to write versus 200 grants to write, and so on. And so we'll be doing that evaluation piece in-house in partnership with the regions. And so we really believe that this will give us the flexibility in partnership with the personnel committee to make the decisions that benefit Ohio. So I think those are the highlights. There may be, that's all of the slides. I would love to take any questions you have about the grants budget or the operating budget.
I saw a note, really in the grants budget, but there's a note here about potentially compensate the expert panel. Is that a conversation we should have today, or is that something for further down the road?
So we left the flexibility again in the budget to do so if we needed and decided at a later date, perhaps once we get through the first grant round, that you all, believe that this may constitute maybe the need for a stipend or more work. What we will see here in a moment is that we have kind of worked with our expert panel selections that we'll talk through the slate here in a moment. They're all expecting to come to this in a volunteer basis. But again, not knowing the value of applications and what they will experience in this first year, we wanted to leave that option open and try to think through things like that. What could we want to spend money on if we needed to make sure we reserve that opportunity should it present itself? But it is not currently slated to pay.
Thank you.
Within the computer and software line, is there a consideration of automating your contracting process?
There is. And so we have been meeting with our banks as well as Akoya Go, given again, that volume question of how many grants, we will try to automate as much as possible. And and make sure that we have still those eyes on certain pieces of the contract, but that is definitely a consideration. And we're really excited that our banking partners are willing to work through that as well. We didn't want things like like the ability to cut checks. And I know Jim has a lot of opinions about check processing, but we didn't want any of our grantees to experience any hiccups. So we're really thinking through those operations.
Are there any further questions to come before the body? At this point, we'll have two different votes. The first motion to adopt the 2024 operating budget
So move, Claymire.
by Evan. Is there a
Second.
second? And Marcia, second. Any discussion? Well, it was a very well put together budget, I might add. Is there any further discussion on the operating budget? Second, is there a motion to approve the 2024 grant budget?
So move, Claymire.
So by Evan,
Second.
we'll have Jeanette. He's our second. Any discussion on the grant budget? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And motion. So now we move on to the expert panel and ad hoc committee report. We determine relations through that process, but before I do, we have one of our expert panelists in the room. Fine, Lavelle, could you stand and introduce yourself to the board?
Good morning. My name is Lavelle Custard. I'm the governor's appointee to the expert panel. I've been in mental health and behavioral health and addiction services for over 20 years. I'm currently the CEO of a mental health addiction facility in Cuyahoga County.
Thank you so much. And Deb, do we have you online?
Might not be on anymore.
Pardon me? No? Very good. Well, then, we look forward to hearing from both of them in coming weeks. With that, I'll turn it over to Alicia.
I am here.
Oh,
All right.
hey, Jen.
I'm sorry, he faded out when he said the name, but I'm assuming it was me.
Yes, if you could just introduce yourself to the group here in the room and online.
Sure, I am Deb Flores. I'm the CEO of the Zeph Center in Northwest Ohio, the Toledo area. And I have been a licensed social worker for most of my career, and I look forward to the opportunity to see everyone in person soon.
Thank you, Deb. All right, and I think to start, I just want to say thank you to Director Whittington and others who have put a lot of work in the expert panel process. Before we inherited that process here at One Ohio, we received many applications. I think Sarah will first walk us through the expert panel policy that should be in all of your board packets and the updates we want to make to that. And then we will move to executive session. So take it away, Sarah.
Hello, everybody. So you all have the expert panel policy in your packet. Oh, thank you. There we go. Okay, so the main revisions to the expert panel policy after we combed through all of the foundation's governing documents, that includes the MOU, the code of regulations, the grant policy and the expert panel policy. There were 4 places that talked about the role and the function and how the expert panel would be operating. So we pulled all of that and added it into the expert panel policy, as well as further defined their role and how they would operate and be governed, so that when we bring on our expert panel members, we can essentially hand them a volunteer job description and this policy, and they'll know essentially what they need to do and how they'll operate, and it's very clear for all of us and our regional partners as well. So we further defined the role of the expert panel that you can see on the screen, and there's really 3 main buckets of work for the expert panel. They will advise One Ohio, that includes us at the foundation board, and this is in support of our purpose to promote the health and safety of Ohioans. So think about the strategic planning process. They'll be a part of helping us, make sure we know what's going on, what we can anticipate, emerging trends, things like that. And most of that language came right from existing governing language that we have right now in the expert panel. The last two buckets are really around our purpose of funding. So they will advise the grant oversight committee as well as support the grant process. And that does include things like the technical review of the grant process, really weighing in on some of the gray areas we might get or innovations. So that is the updated expert panel policy for your consideration today.
The document references both the memorandum of understanding and then the code of regulations. Are those two separate things?
Yes.
Okay, well, forgive me for asking a dumb question.
I do have two questions. One, under section 2.5, I believe it's page 1. I wasn't sure, it says clarify abatement strategies and create new abatement strategies when necessary. I wasn't sure if the MOU allows this foundation to create new abatement strategies. Can you clarify that?
It's a good question. And so through the abatement strategies in the MOU, one of the things that I noticed as I looked around the country, what was missing, what was different about their abatement strategy MOUs versus ours. One of the things that really stood out to me is that sentence, in that some of them allow for that evolution to occur. And so it's a good point. It's one that I think we should talk about probably further with the board. But as things emerge, we're looking ahead. And so if in 10 years, there's a new abatement strategy that we want to, or in 2 years, as the drug problem, evolves, we wanted to reserve that right to support new abatement strategies. That process would be that they would kind of come to you all with recommendations. They would need to be voted and approved before we add it to the abatement list.
Thank you. And in my second, which obviously I don't have the conflict of interest policy in front of me, but under section 6 obviously talks about conflict of interest. I think that's important, especially if the expert panel members might represent some agencies that could qualify for One Ohio funding, or again, making decisions within, I guess, their area, whatever is one county or the region. I think that will be very important to make sure we handle there, I guess.
No further.
Yeah, I want to follow up. I did not see that portion that you referred to. So just to clarify, and maybe I'm incorrect, my understanding of the expert panel is to make sure that the recommendations from the regions are in line with the MOU and the abatement strategies that are set out in the MOU that we've all agreed to. It is not my understanding that the expert panel offers ideas on their own to bring to this board for consideration. So is that what this is saying?
Which one specifically are you looking at?
I think
Section 2.5.
I think the director is referring to the section that Director Andrew pointed out. And so this is saying that the expert panel, if we were to be confronted or asked to support a new idea that's not in the abatement strategies from a region, they would review that request and give you all a recommendation on whether or not they think that that new request meets the expert panel, the abatement strategies, and or creates a new abatement strategy to which you all have the ability to add new abatement strategies.
So is that, I don't know if you asked this question, was that spelled out in the MOU related to the expert panel? Is that in there?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think item 9 in the MOU addresses them making
Section 9, make
recommendations.
recommendations of seek to ensure all regions have addressed them. So I don't think it.
And that's our interpretation of operationalizing the process.
and forgive me, it just seems curious to me with the conversations that we've had in the past. Related to the regional priorities and this whole process that we're going through to get the applications, to have the review. To have it go before the expert panel, have it finally be approved by this board, that those strategies are what we are most focused on. And I hear you say maybe in the future, the expert panel offers different ideas. I just don't see a world in which we have the need for additional ideas from the expert panel when we've got so much need and expertise at the local levels. So I don't know if I'm missing something here, and I don't mean to be confrontational. I'm glad you caught it. I didn't see this. It's just that is a new wrinkle from where I sit in the responsibilities of the expert panel. Again, I thought the expert panel was to review and make sure that the recommendations from the regions are in line with the MOU. And they're in line with the abatement strategies outlined there. I did not understand that they would have any role offering their own ideas to this board. So that's a new wrinkle for me. I just want to lay that out there. And if it's stated in the MOU and I missed it, so be it. I just did not have that understanding of the role of the expert panel.
And I understand Denise's concerns and don't really see any downside in hearing more ideas, right? If we ultimately as a board decide, what gets funded and what doesn't, to me, the more cooks you have in the kitchen, the better you're gonna get, right? So I understand it's not specifically defined anywhere, at least to, my reading of it, it may be. But I don't see any downside in hearing more ideas.
Are there any further questions then for Sarah on the expert panel policy? Thank you. Is there a motion then to accept the changes to the expert panel policy as outlined?
So moved.
Mr. Natalia and Mike, second. Any discussion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. I would now like to have a motion to go to executive session to discuss personnel and legal matters.
So moved.
Dr. Michael,
And second.
second by member Matz. We want to still do roll calls on this.
Yes.
Okay, roll calls.
Director Bond,
Yes.
Director Amen,
Yes.
Director Fix.
Yeah.
Director Andrew,
Yes.
Director Old. Director Old,
Not here.
Director Mason,
Yes.
Director Mayor,
Yes.
Director Worsbicky,
Yes.
Director Dodge,
Yes.
Director Dreehouse,
Yes.
Director Hohaddle,
Yes.
Director Tyler Lee,
Yes.
Director Mattia,
Yes.
Director Picciarelli,
Yes.
Director Matz,
Yes.
Director Silac,
Yes.
Director Gregoire,
Yes.
Director Portman,
Yes.
Director Roizen,
Yes.
Director Baker,
Yes.
Director Claymire,
Yes.
Director Plummer.
Yes.
In here.
There are a couple.
Catherine.
Catherine has dropped off.
Okay. We have sufficient vote to go into executive
Yes, we do.
session. Okay, we will now officially reconvene our meeting. We have brought our guest and other members back into the meeting. So as stated in the One Ohio MOU and our code of regulations, the expert panel will consist of 9 total members, 2 appointed by the governor. As indicated earlier, we have 2 with us today, both Lavelle Custard and Deb Flores. But not with us today is John Sprague. The One Ohio board members have the ability of appointing 6 members to the expert panel. Today, 4 for appointment, and we'll continue searching and interviewing for the other 2. So what I'll need is a motion, state the names, to approve the addition of the following to the One Ohio expert panel: Stephanie Robinson, Is in recovery-oriented systems of care and peer support. Dr. Zilli, who has worked at NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Dr. Kim Sperber, experience in implementation science and complex health program development. And finally, Dr. Christine Lauder, has expertise in supporting pregnant and postpartum women.
Motion to approve the four names as presented.
By Director Fix, over here by Director Mayor. Is there any discussion on the motion? We will do it by roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carried.
Sir, may I ask, point of order, is there a way that we could make a motion to turn down the air conditioning? It's freezing.
I checked it. It was on cool and put it on heat, but I that got cool. So you don't want to come to Cleveland in February.
Thank you though, Jeff.
Sorry to interrupt.
So the next item we do have is the Grants Oversight Committee report. We'd like to turn over this point to Chair Tom Gregoire, our Grants Oversight Committee Chair.
Righty, just a brief update. We met this morning. The first thing we worked on was our schedule of meetings. We're going to continue to meet for an hour before each of our board meetings, and beginning in January, we're going to meet an additional day each month with the so twice a month we'll meet with the position that Alicia can call us back if she needs us, another round of us, or needs us. We heard an update on Sarah's travels around the state. We're doing a lot of work with engaging with the regions. Sarah and Alicia have attended regional meetings at 14 of the regions, met with 3 other region leaders, and are working to connect with the final 2. One of the things we talked about in our last meeting, it went a little further with, is regional readiness. There's 7 items that we're looking at. I'll read to you in just a minute about preparedness in the region. Some of our regions are really far along and others are still working. So the checklist item, and we have a dashboard for it, is to have submitted bylaws for your region, to have filled your leadership position, to have a roster of regional members, to have determined your funding priorities, or determined that you weren't going to have funding priorities, but you've just made your decision either way. That particularly with the ones that have multiple counties, that you are working on a process for funding allocation across those, that you have a review committee or are establishing a review committee, and that you identify one person in the region who is the power user for the software. So we're in progress on that. As I said, we got a little scorecard. I don't think we have up on a slide for you, but folks are moving along on that. We also had a demo from the Akoya Go folks to look at the software and progress. I think we generally got pretty impressed with what we saw. I see head shaking of those who saw it. And that's my major update. What would you add?
I think you covered it.
Okay. Questions?
Go ahead, Bruce.
I do have a question, just to make sure the full body, I guess it's on the same page. The funding priorities that you mentioned, the region can but doesn't have to necessarily go through a process for priorities. Is that correct?
That's right. They have to have decided they're going to or not going to, they may say, a region may say, we want to see a lot of things about X, or a region may say, give us your best shot and we'll decide what works. But we just need them to have made that decision.
And how do you want the regions to decide? You want a motion from the regions, or what do you need?
The regions just need to communicate to us that they've had that conversation and made a decision.
And then you also mentioned something about that each region should have a review committee. Is that a shall or it may have?
Help me out on that one.
Well, some, sorry, from the peanut gallery.
You might want to come to a mic.
That's a good call. I'm coming.
We go.
Use ours.
Oh, I'm too far. I'm committed.
So some regions, their whole regional board is their review committee. Some have a few of their full, some have an entirely separate group. Just
So
need to
again,
know.
it's up to the region.
Yes.
So those are just
Yes.
optional recommendations for the regions.
No,
They're not,
they're not optional, but they gotta tell us
have
who.
something.
Yeah. So letting me know who's reviewing for your region, who they are, and so it might not be called a review committee, but who is reviewing.
And I think that's important. That way we can operationalize who has access to the grant portal to get to the applications and do the scoring rubric that will work.
You know, I think, and I have a little bit of confusion, I'm glad you straightened it out, but I like the idea you're empowering the regions. So you're leaving it up to the regions, even with the priorities, the regions are setting the tone, not this board. So I'm very happy with that.
Folks, unless there's other questions.
If there are no, oh, I'm sorry, Jeanette.
I'm just wondering if we have a schedule yet?
We do not.
Okay.
We'll be talking about that here soon.
Schedule for
The grants being open.
Yeah, this time I'll actually turn it over to Alicia for the executive director's report.
Well, much of what I was, would perhaps mention was in the grants committee report, and in our budget discussion. So at this time, I just say thank you to many of you who have allowed us to come into your home, your regional homes, and really learn a lot about what you have and what you're working on. As Tom mentioned, we continue to go out to the regions. We are glad that we've spoken with each region and have visited most, 14 of the 19, and really are working to establish a couple supporting mechanisms that we talked about and that Sarah could mention in the grants committee. For example, after the board meetings in the new year, Sarah will be hosting a regional recap that will allow all regional committee members across the state to have an opportunity to ask us questions. We'll go through what we decided as a board and just hear feedback directly from them. So we're really excited to put that in place in the new year. We're also working on how do we officially support the decision-making around things like the allocation item that we just discussed for the funding priorities. And so we are working really hard to support that decision-making process in the new year, and we are excited to partner and continue talking to your regions. The only last thing I'll say is if you need help, if your regions need help, give us a call. Sarah and I have been meeting with a number of groups, trying to organize and support in any way possible. So we'll continue to do that over the holidays and into the new year. We're excited to work with you. So I will keep it short because we've hit on everything else. I will turn it over to Connie to talk through the communications update.
Thank you, Alicia.
I'll get through this quickly, but wanted to provide everybody a quick 30,000-foot overview of some of the work that we've been doing on the comms team over the past 12 months. Just a quick reminder of some of our priorities. Obviously, first and foremost, help Ohioans across the state and others understand what the foundation is, what our mission is, what we're going to be doing to help Ohioans that isn't knowing. I'm sure you all encounter people every day who maybe don't know what One Ohio is. So we're constantly trying to find opportunities to educate, which then leads into the next priority, which is build those relationships with the stakeholders who care about what's happening in this room and outside of this room to support prevention, treatment, and recovery across Ohio. And so, as we've talked about, we'll jump into a little bit more. There's been a lot of work done this year to make sure that the groups who want to know who we are, know how to work with us, know how to connect with us, We have a two-way communication going as there are updates. So that's been a huge priority. And then also obviously making sure that we're continuing to carry out our commitment to transparency, continuing to utilize the website and other communication tools to share information and make it as easy as possible for people to know what you all and our staff are doing every day. Just real quickly on some of the media engagement and thought leadership. This is a snapshot of coverage over the past year. This is all inclusive, as best we can capture the stories that we've seen that are related to Ohio. And then on the next slide, but we've had 3 op-eds that have run either by board members or by Alicia, and I'm hoping we'll have another one run next weekend. So let me put that last bullet there, but op-eds that give us the opportunity to tell our story directly to the readers. Out of our earned media, so positive, proactive coverage, we've placed over 25 stories this year, 71 million impressions, which is a lot. That's a snapshot of some of the outlets that have covered Ohio news. Many of them have covered multiple stories throughout the year. So continuing to build on that and make sure that these news organizations are getting our updates regularly and helping us share that information out to their readers and viewers. You know, again, this is just based on some of our proactive, positive coverage that we've received, but again, had a lot of our meeting recaps, other press releases that we share on a regular basis get picked up, and that's ongoing on our end to keep building that exposure across the state. You know, as Alicia's traveling now, we'll meet with more newspapers. We will try to pitch stories while we're in certain areas. We had some great coverage out of Van Wert a couple weeks ago. We had a great meeting with Mirsha and Alicia in Tiffin, which got not only a good story about One Ohio, but also a very positive editorial. So we'll continue to build on that as Alicia's traveling. This slide should look somewhat familiar. These are some of the groups that we've met with, and our communication team has helped coordinate and support meetings with these groups on an ongoing basis. Now that Alicia and Sarah on board, we've gone back to many of these groups. We're having continued conversations there. And then we'll continue to amplify that engagement throughout 2024, especially as the grant work starts to ramp up. So just, and then ongoing activities kind of on every day, depending on what's popping. Talking regularly with Alicia and others about different communications issues, continuing to look at opportunities for releases and op-eds. As we have more detail around the grant committee or the grant work, we'll have more fact sheets, informational materials that we'll be building to support an education process and engagement process. And then our e-newsletter, which launched Q1 of this year, has become really effective tool to keep everybody updated on a quarterly basis. And then if we want to, at some point, we can push that out more regularly, but right now the quarterly timing seems to be okay, but that may change as we get into the grant work. Just some of Kevin's work, just give him a shout out here. On the digital engagement, we've had a big jump in our distribution list this year through not only organic outreach by Ohio website, so us, as we meet with people, as we talk to people, encouraging them to sign up, or we're actively adding them into the distribution list. Almost 2,000 people or contacts around the state now getting our updates, getting our news releases, newsletters. So a great number that we're building there. The last newsletter that went out a couple of weeks ago, Kevin noted that we had a 61% open rate within 24 hours, which is a really huge number. Shows a lot of interest in what One Ohio is doing. So try to keep building on that into 24. You know, keep building Facebook followers, keep building our Twitter followers, and then obviously utilize YouTube to continue to share board meeting videos and other information, so it's easy for Ohioans to know what's going on. It's kind of small, but we've got a lot of comms work coming up in 24. Every year that I've worked with this group, I've built a communications plan based on the strategies and priorities of the organization. So we'll be meeting next week. We'll start to build out some of that planning to make sure that the communication work is supporting and helping mission move forward for the overall foundation. Obviously continuing to support that stakeholder engagement work. As I mentioned, continuing to find opportunities to really push our positive, proactive message out to Ohioans directly through media. I think the biggest, most obvious thing on the list is the grant program communications and making sure that we have a very robust toolkit that anybody can pick up and easily understand what's going on, and make it as clear and succinct as possible. So they have references at the ready on the website that they can go to make sure that they're engaging in the process if they would like to. And then finally, continuing to support Kevin and his work on the web and digital content. Any questions? Thank you.
And then last but not least, I'll ask Jim to join us to give a financial update.
So in the board packets, included the reports for October, and November. And so looking at the November report, there's a couple things I want to highlight. First is, at the bottom of the page in the cash balance. Unexpectedly, in November, we received another 4.3 million from the line of bankruptcy. We were not expecting to receive any more money. That bankruptcy is run by the National Opioid Abatement Trust. Completely different managing agency than the MOU, right? It's kind of a separate thing. So we have made some contact. They don't anticipate right now any more funds. What they said, like spring too, but as the bankruptcy works its way through, we don't know if we're going to get any more funds. So for the purposes right now, I've just included the Malik prop in the same line, the 8 million at the bottom of the page. Okay. Until such time we can take action. To the budget, so we've continued to try to be frugal with the budget and for the most part have come well under cost with each of these lines, except for it's been a challenge throughout the year, as you guys are aware. In September, we asked for 150,000 to cover expenses over the summers. It's our projection through the year. With the idea that those costs would go down in September and October due to other actions. That didn't happen, right? So we are requesting transferring up to 60,000 from other lines savings, right? So there's no additional budget to cover those current bills and the anticipation of November and December. What was the proposed amount? Sorry, 65,000? Up to 60,000. Up to 60,000. Are you looking for a motion?
And that's mainly legal, is that?
Yes. The fiscal policy says that if any line goes over 10%, we come back in the board. And again, that motion is just to adjust, move funds in the budget. It's not an increase in the budget. I'll make the motion.
So there is a motion then to increase the legal budget by $60,000 to cover the remaining legal expenses for 2023. Is there a second to the amendment? By Dwayne, there's a second. So at least we have on the floor for discussion right now, the motion to increase the legal budget by $60,000 to cover the expenses coming in.
Is it just legal? Is it all the overages in 3 or 4 categories? It's to cover all the overages, right?
This is just legal, isn't it?
It's just the legal.
Just the legal.
if we're gonna go over budget line by 10%.
So the other ones don't need a motion.
It's money that we've already spent.
Is it because some of the bills are still being sent to us?
We just received the Benish bill yesterday that was not anticipated.
Not anticipated in what way?
We didn't think we were gonna pay it. Have to pay it.
We thought the AG's office was gonna pay it. Because they had opened up a special counsel matter. And we didn't know why they opened up that matter, but they did. So we were under the impression that they were gonna pay that bill.
Because they declined to pay it then?
They have.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? We'll do it by by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
What?
Go ahead. Jim, Judge has a
We
question.
talked about briefly earlier about the Purdue Sackler settlement that we saw is in the Supreme Court currently. As the settlement stands now, do we have any idea of what kind of percentage this would add to this anticipated to be received? Is this gonna be 10%, 50%? Any ideas?
I think we can do that math and get back to you all on that. I do believe it'll be significant, but we're watching it. And so some of the more recent discussions have been 4 to 6 billion. There are things like direct payments to families built into those settlements. Settlement payments to the state would be included in those discussions, but it's not finalized and moving around a lot. But we can do based off of the current proposals, some estimates there, but I do believe it could be significant, similar to perhaps maybe like the distributor payment amounts, which
Okay.
were the biggest,
Significant, yeah.
biggest bucket we've received.
Also, I heard a rumor at one point that regarding the taxation funds that might be received from issue 2, that this organization could be in play for receipt of the funds. Is that just anybody have any? They're talking about it across the street right now.
Yeah. So we definitely have been watching. We were flattered by a couple of groups, as you may have saw in some of the headlines, who have proposed that perhaps some of the money should come to One Ohio. We think, we definitely are watching the discussions. We think that One Ohio is going to be and should be a voice for treatment, prevention, recovery, support, and really would welcome an opportunity to talk more about what we could do. It would take a motion and an approval of the board for us to really, accept any funds or do things, but we are researching that as an opportunity, and we'll come back to you all. Things are moving quickly right now, but we continue to kind of just make sure folks know who we are, what we can do, and watch and monitor this as it goes along. I think we'll be coming back to you as a staff team with some recommendations as this evolves. I think that's best I could say.
I think it would be a nice idea if our executive director, testified that we talked about, funding in perpetuity and setting aside money for the future. That's been one of our internal debates. That proposal, and also at the same time, while testifying about how this organization has been so litigation, that is, this money is going where it is needed and intended to go. So we need a a motion for that. I think by the time we meet February, this will be over and decided.
It's gonna be over.
So then the motion is to encourage the executive director to give testimony that one of issue two.
Because Ms.
That
Nelson,
mean-
Ms. Nelson has looked bored lately to me, so I think she should have one more thing to do. Yes, that is the motion.
Is there a second to the motion by Director Mattia?
I'll make that motion. I think they're gonna figure this all out today. Today's the last day of their session, so.
So we have some experts in the room. For the legislature, is it, I mean, I think it's a great idea. Is it too late though?
I think we're gonna know something today.
And I couldn't quite get that, what you said.
I would guess we're gonna know something today.
But it's a statute, so it could be amended at any time from the legislature.
Yeah, we can
Right.
pass it.
Well, I think it's a good motion, so if there's no further discussion, I'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, and the motion carries.
Can I ask a question? So as we, on the heels of issue two, potential dollars coming in light of the additional money that's in our report here today, can we revisit the conversation about distribution? So we have some kind of formula where we know if we are going to get additional tranches of dollars, what we, how we allocate those moving forward. So I think we've made decisions about what we had in front of us. But if we could have a broader conversation in January, the good news is we're getting more dollars into the foundation. My question is, how are those dollars being spent? And I'm not sure, from my perspective, that we've made some decisions on tranches 1 and 2, left kind of the rest of it a little more ambiguous. And so maybe it's time to revisit as we continue to get additional tranches into the pot.
I think you can have that conversation in January. The rest of us are gonna be here in February.
Oh, are we not meeting in January?
Yeah.
So February, maybe a better date then?
Valentine's
I'll have a conversation with myself. Oh, that's right, it's Valentine's Day. Or maybe, maybe even a recommendation from the executive director related to that or something, some conversation. But
Yeah, I think at the request of the board, we can pull information together. We will have an investment committee. I will tell you, the way our policies are written currently, based on the MOU, you all only had to make decisions on those first initial payments. And from there, since then, any additional payments that we receive, for example, the Mallinckrodt dollars, have just been on a holding account and earning interest. So those funds are not being spent. They are not allocated, though, to your point, and are earning substantial interest in the short-term market. I think that it's something that we can kind of come back to and revisit.
no, I understand.
Yep.
Okay, then as a wrap up, remember, we do not have a board meeting in January. It'll be, we'll be focusing on our committee work. Our next meeting, I'm so pleased we'll be meeting on in a Columbus area to be announced, and there'll be more details and a counter notice. So there'll be no further business to come before this body. We are adjourned.